Who would have believed that a county first school in Milton Keynes would have become the setting for one of the most extraordinary space adventures ever told?
UFO Stories. Chapter 1. A spooky fright. Once not long ago there was a school called Newlyn Place. In that school were more than 100 children. One Thursday night there was a big bang near that school. Neighbours heard the bang and came out of their houses to see what it was, but there was nothing to see but some fireworks, so they thought it was some naughty children trying to wake people up, so they went back to bed.
I remember hearing a loud bang in the middle of the night, and there was a wall at the end of my road, and my parents thought that a lorry had crashed into it or something, but then on the way to school we realised that wasn't the case. I still don't know how they made this big bang. It was really loud.
It was so loud some of the windows of houses shook, and the police were inundated with phone calls about the Big Bang one night.
About 50 phone calls.
But the police were absolutely fine. Thank you, sir. Thank you, madam. We've logged your call. Be assured, everything's fine.
So when I went to school the next morning, there was a big spaceship and there was a police in the playground, and there was a professor, and he was trying to work out what it was.
And as the children came into the playground, he was going round and round the spaceship, and it was emitting all these noises, like, and then the police were saying, keep back, and all this kind of thing.
And all the kids were so excited, I remember, and all the parents just had a look of disbelief on their face. I think it was all a bit surreal.
Everybody was gobsmacked. They had no idea what was going on.
And then I saw some parents run out in tears. And I went around the school and grabbed them on the pavement. They had already dropped off their children. I said, what's the matter? We've just left our children at school, and there's a spaceship, and it's radioactive, and we're scared. We've left our children there. And I said, it's pretend.
I remember the parents' reactions, and I had completely underestimated, because I knew this was staged and set up. I assumed, I think, that parents would think the same.
After register, we went into the hall. We all sat down in our classes. We all sat next to Miss, most of us. The professor put a ruler around his head with a balloon with sellotape, and it was funny, and he was juggling. The balloon was the sun, and he demonstrated the world going around the sun, and he had a Mars bar and he pretended it was Mars, and then he had a flying saucer from his cup of tea.
I did what I thought was a pretty cheesy, silly introduction. I figured that would make it even less likely they'd believe anything.
Yes, it might have been cheesy when we look back at it today, but I think there's an element in all of us that want to believe things. We want to believe that something's different, and we want to be a part of that. So.
Then we went to have a look at the spaceship, and Dad had a knock on it.
I could hear everything, and I could hear Professor Blenkin stop whipping the children into a frenzy, going, "Shall we open it?" And they were like, "Yes." And then by the end of it, there was a roar, "Yes, open it, open it."
The door of the spaceship freezer opened slowly like this, and a silver hand came out like this.
And 2 or 3 of the children were terrified and ran to me. I was sitting at the back, and I think all of the teachers were sitting at the back or on the side. But anyway, they ran to all of us. And of course, you only want 2 or 3 children to do that, and they all do it. So we had the entire school clinging to all the teachers at the back, terrified.
And everybody screamed, and then we all went out the hall because this hand came out and somebody screamed, and then we all screamed and ran out. And we just saw one hand come up, then another hand come out of the little gap. We just thought it was a baddie thing, what could come out and kill us. We thought he had guns with it. I thought it was a little green man with a laser gun or something with a really long arm.
The teachers who'd not been in this situation, and we said, right, we go back, we reassure the children. We had tears, so we reassured the children, calmed them down and said it's perfectly safe.
So they had to come back to the hall and meet Zerena, who they called Silver, which was quite nice, and see that she was confused and unhappy herself.
When the teacher actually brought the first class back, the teacher was saying, it's probably more frightened of you than you are of it. And then one of the children went, oh, it's copying.
And then Professor Blenkinscott became that intermediary. And they just immediately fell in love with her. At that moment, they fell in love with her. This was their alien. Yeah. And that was just the start.
As they got to know me, they started to be, first, so they were terrified, then they were interested, and then after a little while, once they knew that they were safe and I was no risk to them, they all were very caring and loving towards me. It's quite extraordinary, just beautiful, really unimaginable. I had no idea that would happen.
Fishermead at the time was a very impoverished area, and there was a lot of stress related to poverty, which caused a lot of instability. Having said all of that, it was a real joy to be working here. The children were absolutely delightful. So were the families. I've always said that Fishermead is the most generous society that I've worked with.
And when I came here, I'd been here a week, and I sat in your sitting room with Jill and said, I've just moved to this school, and this, we're going back to 1988 now, but there are so many children in this school where their language skills are really poor, and we've got a lot of young parents. It's a very welcoming school to families, but they're not really engaged with their education. And we've got to do something. And you told me about this egg. And I just thought, that's it.
Me, in my enthusiastic way, was telling Julia about a project that my predecessors at Interaction had done, George King and Carrie Gorney. And they'd worked with White Spires School. And the idea was that George had arrived dressed in pith helmet and khaki shorts. He was an adventurer. He'd been out in the jungles of wherever, Africa. And he came back to tell the children about his adventures. And he had found this giant egg which stood on the stage, and he told the story. And in the course of the story, as he was telling it, there was a knock from inside the egg. And they opened the egg, and there was this creature, this person who looked a bit strange, and she didn't have any language, and it transpired that she needed to be taught how to act, how to speak, everything else. And I just loved the concept of the idea that the children were in the position of being the teachers, because in a way, when you teach something, you learn it a lot better. And I was telling Julia this, and it occurred.
I remember you saying to me, okay, Julia, let's do this then. So how many children? 30? I said, no, it's 150. You've got to do it with the whole school. We can't just pick one class. This is a big, this has got to be something that we do with all children to just create this wonderful experience of awe and wonder that will get them so excited that they'll rush home and talk to their parents will be so excited, they want to know what's going on in their school, and they were really engaged with their child's education.
When Julia first mentioned the project, I don't remember very clearly, but I think my reaction would have been one of cautious excitement. The whole project fits in with my philosophy of experiential, first-hand, real-life learning.
Huge amount of work went into the planning of this. We didn't just say, right, an alien's landed, let's get on with it and see what happens. I mean, it was well structured, a lot of planning, and we created the framework, the storyline of having a row with the parents, which, getting lost and landing here in Newlyn Place School grounds in a spaceship. But we knew that this project was 6 weeks long. At the 6 weeks, the children were going to come on the journey, and the children were successfully going to get her back home to her parents to be safe.
I was very concerned with the area being relatively unstable at the time, very high mobility. And I used to say, from 1 week to the next, we'd got the same number of children on roll, but they were never the same children. I was very reluctant to give them with another goodbye. I was very worried about that. So through discussion, we worked on making that goodbye very, very positive. And in fact, when Zerena left, it meant that our children had succeeded, not only in teaching her the skills to survive here, but having the necessary skills to get herself back home and back to her family.
We're trying to teach Silver to speak our language. She can say hello because Micheal taught her to. We need to teach her some words, to tell her how to say birthday, floor, not to eat berries, not to touch glass, not to eat nails, because she nearly ate one.
Zerena had to learn to read and write. Zerena had to learn her arithmetic. And when you have, for children, being given the opportunity of knowing what to do and having to share their skills and knowledge with another is very empowering.
Our aims at the time for the education were all-round academic. We taught her to read and we taught her maths.
But the whole curriculum centred around her, reading, writing, arithmetic, making, but it all came from this Zerena project.
But as much, if not more than that, I wanted them to consolidate their work on values. Kindness, generosity, acceptance. And I wanted them to help her to get back home so that was their success. I wanted their self-esteem to be raised through this.
She don't know what a television is yet. If someone dies, she'll probably copy them. Or anyone stabs anyone, she'll probably copy them. So I don't think she should watch news. She doesn't copy adults. She only copies children. If we said jump in the fire and we jumped in the fire, she would as well. I could see programmes with swear words in, she might start swearing.
And what was interesting, I think, was how moral the children at Newlyn Place were.
Amazing.
They taught her some of the kind of etiquette, how to behave on Earth, which was helpful, like not stand on the table, but sit on the chair.
Sarah taught her to jump, but she only jumped on the chair, and she started climbing all on the tables and tipped the crayons out.
In the dining room, she would stand on the tables and run around, and they would try and say, no, Zerena, you know, this is not how you do it. You have to sit down. And they would try and feed her, and when she threw food, they were so shocked. It was so terrible. But they taught her how to behave and what she should be doing and how, she should react to things. And it was just wonderful to see.
Because I didn't know what to do, it gave me the slack, really, to be very, very naughty. And probably the naughtiest was with a little boy who was teaching me about that you had to stay in where you could play. And he said, you can play in the playground, and he said, and you can actually play outside on the pavement, and sometimes you can play in the road, which I thought probably wasn't the case. So once he told me that, I immediately headed out to the pavement, and he was kind of looking around to see if any of the teachers or anyone else. I don't know how come, it was just me and him in the playground. So I went out onto the pavement, and he was happy with that. And I had quite an old car at the time, and I got, I looked at the car, and I looked at the boy, and I looked at the pavement, and then I jumped up onto the bonnet of the car, started jumping up and down, and I jumped from the bonnet onto the roof, and I was waving and going, come on, and I was beckoning him to come and join me, and he was going, Silver, get down, you'll get in trouble, Silver, come on. And I was like, what? Look, you can see everything. He was like, come on, get down, Silver, you'll get in trouble. And I was like, oh, I don't want to. And he was like, come on, quick. We got back in the playground, but it was so brilliant. It was like I'd found the edge with him beyond which it wasn't okay to go, and being on top of the car was it. And then it was role reversal. He was like teaching me how to behave, and it's just so touching.
Silver, Silver, we love you and we love you. Silver is here because she had a row with her mum and dad, and she wouldn't clear up her bedroom. So one night she came in late because she had got in her spaceship and she went to another planet, but she crashed on the way. She came down and landed at our school. It was just like Silver, what happened to Silver, because one night I was late and I didn't come home in time and I got told off. So I decided to run away, but my mum came up and I thought about it, and then I didn't run away after all.
They took her shopping, where she did a lot of pilfering at the local co-op. And again, you can't steal, Zerena, it's wrong.
Yeah.
The children knew right from wrong, and here they were, empowered as 5, 6, 7, 8-year-olds. This huge alien, really was an adult, but she's only a little girl, teaching her right from wrong.
We walked around the whole of the shop, like the shops, and she just kept picking things up, like sniffing them and then putting them back. But I do remember her taking a bite out of this apple, and the kids like, you can't do that. So that was fun. But like everyone obviously in the shop was sort of looking at her, wondering what was going on. But that was good fun, taking her up and down the aisle, showing her the different things, and she was like smelling I think she was smelling coffee and things like that.
A brother and sister. She likes the turners, she likes the turners and mushrooms. And if she flips them out, we give her something else.
Could you write a list down of all the things that she likes to eat?
Loves this.
It'd be very helpful, because I can give her those things to eat when we get home.
But in amongst all of that, there was a lot of learning. There was a lot of measuring Zerena. There was a lot of writing about Zerena, writing the Newlyn Place newsletter. It was about them being journalists and interviewing her.
We're making houses for her. We made a big house for her and a tree. We're making the same planet like her planet.
The children started to obviously get to know Zerena, and then she started to be able to talk their language, English. So she started to be able to explain things, and she would draw things about what her home looked like, or tell them what her home looked like. They would do a lot of work around this, drawings and stories, and she would tell them a lot about where she came from. And that was how we then built her home, based on their drawings and what she had told them.
Because they were so concerned about Zerena, they wanted her to feel at home. So let's recreate her home here in Newlyn Place.
The home was built in the school hall, and it was made out of bamboo, and all the children added kind of colour and everything, silver things, and it was just, we went along with, with how they and Zerena planned it, really.
So this whole hall then became her planet, and the children took it in turns to make, to play. It became like the new Wendy home, to make things, to put on TV programmes, and to be with Zerena.
I didn't think about it particularly then, but you know, building a house, you've got everything, maths and construction and 3D and imagination and art and home building and craft, and, you know, so everything was inside of the context of, on those days.
We did a whole thing around crossing roads because at the time, you know, that we did have accidents.
The most vivid memory I have of that time was seeing a particular little boy who could be quite a handful in school, and a little bit of a tearaway out of school, in the sense that he did what he wanted to do regardless of traffic, taking her by the hand and teaching her the Green Cross Code and actually helping her to cross the road, teaching her to cross the road, and then making sure she safely got across that road. But he was so tender with her, and of course she was very tall and he was really quite small, but he took her by the hand and just led her across the road, having taught her about looking and listening.
It was really making them think about how they behaved, and for them seeing dangers with somebody else made them realise the dangers for themselves as well.
I remember also that same child, after the project was over, and probably some time after it was over, taking his little sister by the hand and doing the same thing, and crossing the same road with his baby sister in the way that he had helped Zerena.
Silver, silver in your pot, and we know you have a dog.
They wanted to talk to her, they wanted to ask her questions, and when they realised that she couldn't always understand them, it was quite fascinating to see the ways that they tried to communicate with her. And then supporting each other in ways to communicate as well, and helping Zerena make sense of what she was trying to communicate to them.
And the whole point was getting children talking, getting children thinking, getting children to think about what's the right thing to do and the wrong thing to do, and to bring their formal education more alive and getting them to be interested in it.
It was a bit like being a rock star. When I came in, the children, for some reason, loved me. And I think it was because it was very safe. And they really loved to have something of their own to take care of. So at the break times, I used to go into the staff room, and it was like special. They could come in 2 or 3 or 4, and I used to lie down on a bench, and they'd put they'd just treat me like I was their little sister or something. So they'd put a little pillow or a little cushion under my head, and then they'd go, "You're right, are you comfy? Here, let's put a little blanket over." And they put a little blanket, and they go, "Oh, here, do you want my little pony? Look, let's put that there." And they give me, like I was a doll, really. I mean, it was extraordinary. They just wanted to take care of me.
I think we all thought we was responsible to look after her and make sure she was safe while she was with us. We were always holding her hand and making sure she was okay, like to follow us, and that she didn't wander off. But some of the kids did get quite a close bond with her and were always by her side, making sure she was all right. So I think the children really warmed to Zerena while she was here. She was a new friend, kind of like a new person joining the school, where you would want to make sure that they fit in and felt comfortable. I think it was a lot like that.
It was a bit like E.T., wasn't it? You know, it was love, wasn't it? There was that care, that they didn't want anything to happen to her. They didn't want her to see bad things on the telly because she might copy it. They didn't want her stealing from the co-op or doing there was that real care and attention. It was kind of a parental role, wasn't it? Really, again, it wasn't just a teaching role. They were kind of parental with her. Well, was it parental, or was it like their best friend? I don't know.
I think it was both, actually. I mean, there was one pupil who said, "This is the only friend I've ever had." And, that was a huge responsibility to us, how we managed this whole situation. And for us, it was about as these caring young people for Zerena, we had to make sure the journey was very positive, and that they were being successful in reuniting Zerena with her parents, because that's what families are, you know, parents and children. How would their parents feel if they lost them? So it was a very important journey.
When I went to see the professor, he said to tell all of the class that could you please all write something so I could put it in Morse code and send it up to Silver's mum and dad. Nearly everybody's done one, I hope.
I wrote a letter to Silver's mum and dad, and I said that Silver has landed here safely and the professor is looking after her in London, and we're trying to fix the spaceship so she can get back home.
You could find them talking about it in the playground, you know, when there weren't any formal lessons. But it was something that they took home with them. They came to school. I've been thinking about this, Miss Griffiths. Could we ask Zerena this? What do you think? Now, I think this has happened. And there was so much talk and conversation and discussion and children listening to each other. It was wonderful.
They were in charge. That's really it. They got to be responsible. They got to be causing the matter of me finding out how to be in the world and how to be safe and how to get by, really. And I don't think that we actually allow children to do that. I think very often how it goes in just day-to-day life is that we say, no, don't do that, don't do this, don't do that. And actually by allowing them to be the ones that said to me, no, don't do that, it was in a way made things very much more clear and secure for them.
And I don't remember ever thinking it wasn't real. I've just always just remembered what happened. I never got to a point I thought to myself, oh, you know, that was good, you know, a good show by the school. It's just Zerena came to visit us. She was in a spaceship. It's only now I look at some of your pictures, I'm like, wow, that was a fridge. It's good.
Thinking about the concept of lying to children, we said, well, there's Father Christmas. I mean, for instance, as a school, Father Christmas visited every year. So I think we thought, well, okay, you know, maybe lying to children generally isn't the best idea, but there are occasions, there are times when the end justifies the means. If we'd said, now children, we're going to do this project and it'll be a little bit like a play and it's not real, you know, they wouldn't have got absorbed in it, and all the lovely things that came out of it wouldn't have come out of it.
If there were any of the older children or those that had older brothers and sisters who said, hey, that's a load of nonsense, there was no way in that 6 weeks did that become a rumour within the school. The children were completely immersed, and I would say the majority believed it, and any that weren't too sure wanted to, because it was such a positive, enjoyable experience for them, and they were completely engaged in this.
It was brilliant fun, endlessly brilliant fun, the whole thing, and partly because you didn't quite know what was going to happen next, so that was a real big part of it. I guess that would also be true of the children. That was it, you know, that was also in there for the children and the staff, really, that it wasn't totally laid out and it took its own route and nobody knew quite where it was going to go and quite how it was going to end when it started, really.
The children had to respond and react to what was going on, to Zerena, to Professor Blenkinsop, and we didn't know exactly what the reaction was going to be. There was a framework, there was a plan, there were skills and information we wanted to teach the children as part of the project, and we were very clear on that. But at the same time, their response would also dictate how we might eventually achieve that. And every night, you know, it was a case of planning for the next day.
There were always classroom rules, so it was always like, well, if Zerena comes in, remember, she might get frightened if we're very noisy. So you always set the ground rules before things happened, but you never quite knew what was round the corner. But that was part of the excitement.
it was quite scary, I think, for a lot of people, and you just had to trust in the children and in the process being very clear that we were achieving what we set out to do, which was around engaging young people in conversation, giving them a wonderful experience that would bring education alive in a different way, but also engaging the parents in the education, because we all know, well, that's one of the things. If you engage children and their parents in education, children are more successful.
It was just really nice feeling that people were so involved and parents were involved, and just bringing something completely new to children that didn't have a lot.
When we had done projects before, the teachers had always been amazed by the kids who they didn't think were that bright, that interested, that, you know, they were the ones that really got engaged in a way more than the kind of the academic kids who they were, you know, they knew how to play the game, and suddenly the rules had changed.
Yes.
And here was something that was a completely new situation, and actually the ones who up to that point had not been seen as, you know, great achievers or anything like that, they almost like seized the moment.
There was a lot of asking children about how they thought we should get her home, and that's a great creative, you know, piece of work for them to be doing. And in the end, it was decided she'd be flying on a rocket from a place called Start Point, which seemed a good starting point for her to fly home, which children could actually see on the map, which is in the Orkneys or somewhere like that.
What happened after Zerena went back to her planet is that some of the children were really sad and incredibly generous in their outpourings of love, and they wanted to give me their best toys, their teddies. They wanted me to take things back to my planet so that I could share that with the people on my planet, because like I'd shared about my planet with them, and they wanted to reciprocate. And some of them cried when I left. They were just like heartbroken because I'd become, you know, part of their lives. And how the school worked with that is that it was an opportunity then to work with the young people in the school about how do you manage that? How do you manage when someone that you love, or your pet, or your alien leaves? How do you do that? So it gave an opportunity to do some extraordinary work with the young people.
You all have enough prizes?
The final day of the project was a mixture of emotions.
The final day of the project was bittersweet, really.
We had a spectacular parade around Fishermead, which was wonderful because when you think back to the first day and all the insecurities and the worries and the anxieties, and then the whole community, including people who were not parents of the school, pulled together for this wonderful parade around Fishermead.
They'd made shaky things and flaggy things and noisy things and feathery things and streamery things and all of that.
It was a vast array going all around, ending up in a big field. There the children all lined up around the perimeter of the field, and this helicopter came down. They couldn't believe it. They'd never seen a helicopter land before.
And then we said goodbye to Zerena.
I remember all the children being really upset, but happy as well that she was getting to go home, because if I remember rightly, towards the end of her time here, she was getting quite upset because she missed home. So I think we were happy that she was going to get back to her family or where she came from, but we were sad because we would miss her.
Despite the fact that we'd worked so hard with the children to make this positive, of course they were sad. We all were. You know, we were all sad because we'd all become involved.
It was a celebration as well as a goodbye. It was a celebration that they'd managed to achieve this wonderful thing to help this person get back. And we talked about how they would feel, you know, if they were lost, and how it would be important that however much they loved being with you, they still needed to get back to their family, and how that was all important.
I haven't got very clear memories of the last day, and I think it was because, you know, up until this point I've talked about how it was for the children dealing with loss, and I hadn't ever really thought about until this moment what it was like for me dealing with loss. And even now I'm just like moved to tears just thinking about what an unimaginable experience that was. How touching to, you know what children are like, they're just so beautiful and so giving and so full of love. And that was my whole experience of the project. And then I was just going, and I couldn't ever see them again because I was going, you know, to keep the story alive. There was no coming back and debriefing after the project or anything.
And then we went back to the school, we had a party, and then it's how we handled it with the children in the classroom, that well done, and tonight we're going to be looking for a sign. So you look out of your window. Instead of a great big bang, we had a great big firework.
No, it was a parachute flare.
A parachute flare.
That stays up there for about 3 minutes.
Okay.
And it was Neil, the person who let the other one off. He and I drove through the estate, and there are these kids going, it's Zerena, there's a sign.
And I must just mention one little story of a parent who came up to me right at the end. And she said, well, probably the only parent we didn't bring round completely. And she said, well, yeah, I can, you know, this has been a good day, but really, you didn't hoodwink me. I knew all the way along that it was it was a hoax. And to be honest, she said, I thought it was all a bit stupid. And I've no idea how you got such a highly qualified professor from the Science Museum to take part in it.
Adults external to this project, when they came in touch with it, loved it, they embraced it. We had a film crew from Anglia TV that came down to film it. And initially they were trying to get Zerena, just talking to Zerena, okay, Lucy, tell us about, and of course she wouldn't. She stayed in role. The children enrolled, Professor Blenkinsop enrolled. And then we suddenly found they became enrolled, as if they believed the project as well.
The alien appeared friendly. She said her name was Zerena. She said she'd run away from her home planet of Zadrolite after an argument with her mother about tidying up her room. It was agreed that to avoid panic, Zerena's presence at the school should remain a secret. Outside, only Professor James Blenkinsop of the Science Museum knew of her existence.
For me, it's the most exciting thing of my career. I've never seen anything like it, and I've been following UFOs for 20 years.
For me personally, it was a privilege to be the first journalist ever to interview a being from outer space.
Can you tell me what your impressions are of Earth?
It's very green and very friendly.
And so the time came for Zerena to leave. After 6 weeks on Earth, arrangements had finally been made for her to return to Zadrolite. A helicopter was to fly her to the north of Scotland, where a second-hand Apollo rocket had been chartered to take her home. It was the first encounter and the closest any school children have ever had, and one that these youngsters will never forget.
So everyone that came in touch with it, like the police, I cannot thank the police enough because they stuck with us the whole 6 weeks. And it could have caused them an awful lot of problems after the bang going off. But they really believed and could see what we were trying to do, something really positive on this estate, which at the time was recognised as having quite a lot of challenges. This was such a positive thing for the community. Then the other people that just carried on was the Science Museum in London. I think I just rang them. can we come and talk to you? And James, Professor Blenkinsop, came with me. And we just met and just explained the whole project. I think we'd already sent them some information. And they just said yes. And they said yes to, you can display all the work in one of the showcases in the museum. And yes, Professor Blenkinsop can walk around the museum as Professor Blenkinsop with the school pupils, because we took the whole school on coaches down to the Science Museum, as Professor Blenkinsop, as if he's a member of the Science Museum, because you're bringing science alive, the planets and all of that alive. And this is, they just understood it.
The 18th of July 1988. The whole school, plus several families, spent the day in London at the Science Museum, where we met with Professor Blenkinsop again. A thoroughly enjoyable day, despite the coach breaking down on the way home.
Incredible, really, to take a whole school to the middle of London, and then for children to go into the Science Museum and see Professor Blenkinsop and to see their own work displayed on the walls in the Science Museum.
I met the school group when they arrived and showed them around the space exhibits, which I'd done a little bit of minimal research on before, but managed to stretch it as though I kind of knew something about it. And we were able to wing the rest and read the little signs. I remember having to field lots and lots of questions about where is she now, how is she, and all that sort of thing, and where do you have your lunch, Professor, and lots of things like that. And then I want to know when she wasn't at school, where did she sleep when she came to the Science Museum, which was of course in the, to make her feel a little bit more at home. She slept actually in one of the space exhibits on a lunar landscape.
It was so wonderful to see them feeling so proud of themselves, that they'd got things that were worth showing in the Science Museum, this really famous place, and they'd all come, every single one of them had come to London. And to see Professor Blenkinsop there, it just added to the importance of what they'd done. It was just an incredible moment.
A project like that gives all the children, it was the interaction motto, it gives all children a chance to shine. And that's exactly what this project did. Plus it taught them about caring for people, loving people, for children to be the teachers for a change instead of the other way around.
They wanted to learn. I mean, rather than in a classroom and saying, right, this is what we're going to learn today, how many of us remember those boring times, and can we remember what we really learned? No, we don't. But when you bring it alive using the arts, it sticks. I think head teachers, good leaders in a school environment could still do that project. It might be done differently. It's a different landscape now. We've moved on nearly 30 years. But they still could do a project like that, putting at the core a performance or arts that brings the rest of the curriculum alive.
The national curriculum has become such for many teachers, such a kind of a pair of handcuffs.
A straitjacket.
Yeah, and everything is about, maths, English, science, even history and geography go out the window, but certainly the arts. And yet, and people see it almost as a kind of a frippery, really. And, I know from my experience, and obviously the Zerena Project shows that actually it's a vital component, really.
With the introduction to national curriculum, it obviously has changed, because it's changed about what we have to teach in schools. However, for me and my school and my staff, we use it as a vehicle about the what we have to teach, but it doesn't dictate the how you have to teach it. And so a project like the Zerena Project would be something that we would embrace in school today.
If I were to do the project again, in these days, I think it would be much harder persuading people of its value, because everything has to be measured. And I still don't know how you measure things like confidence and values education other than being anecdotal.
If my kids came home and said an alien's landed at school, I think because it's happened to me, I'll be like, yes, that's great. But then maybe for a parent who it hasn't happened to, things are so much different now. It's such a simpler time back then that parents are quite highly strung now with the curriculum, and that I think they'd probably think, why are you wasting my child's time, and not actually see that this is a good thing.
It had a lasting impact on me. And those children loved every moment of that, and I cannot believe that children would not remember that for the rest of their lives. It wasn't coming in and having your maths lesson as usual. It wasn't boring. It made learning come to life, and that's what learning should be about. Learning should involve real things, learning how to care for others. It's not just about times tables and writing and grammar and spelling. You learn if you love learning, and you've got to give children something to love learning about.